I have the pleasure of introducing today Steve Benson. Now, Steve has been someone who has accomplished a lot in the sales industry. Now, if you are a sales rep, if you're doing door to door, if you're looking for lead generation methods, or if you're looking for ways in which you can one software startup, then this is the podcast for you. Let's go ahead and get started. So, Steve, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself? That'd be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. My name's Steve Benson, and the company I started about 11 years ago is called Badger Maps, and it's a piece of software for field salespeople. People that are going and meeting with their
Okay.
customers face to face. Um, I guess a little bit about me. I went to business school at Stanford. I grew up in the Midwest of the United States, in Chicago, and I've lived in California for most of my adult life. But I'm about to move to Spain because that's where one of our biggest offices is. And I just had a baby about a year ago, and it'll be a good
Oh,
place to
yeah.
spend a couple years and help manage that office and get close to the product. That's where the product team is primarily, and a good place to show the baby the world a little bit while she's still young before she's in school.
Awesome. How's your little girl?
Just over a year.
Oh man, I have a 4-year-old son, and I could say, man, when when he was 1, 2, like biggest prayer was that he would actually like go to sleep and sleep in his on his own and come kind of like fun kid to kind of to play with. So I can imagine a 1-year-old. You getting any sleep?
Yeah, enough. I could always get more.
I mean, that's true. You could always get more. So I'm kind of intrigued. So what was life like, growing up in Chicago?
Chicago is a great city. It's a cultural heart of kind of the center of the country, I'd say, and it's a big city, obviously, and I really liked it. I grew up in the city, and it was kind of gritty, and learned a lot there.
Okay.
It's great food. It's a foodie type city. Lots of great stuff to eat, and it's a diverse city, and a lot of people from all over the world and different ideas. And yeah, I really liked it.
Okay. Okay. So then when you started Badger Mouse, when you pretty much got that shift into California.
No, a few years earlier. So I moved out to California right after college, and then I went to business
Okay.
school in California, and then worked for Google and IBM, then Google, and then after Google, like I left Google to start Badger.
Gotcha. Okay. So what was that like? What was the experience like, working at Google? Like, what was those takeaways?
I mean, so I learned a lot working there. I was there for I think about 4 years, and I was on the enterprise software team. So right, the team that sells software, makes software for businesses to use. So things like the Google Docs suite, Gmail.
Yeah.
They've got a bunch of security products. Today they've got the whole cloud really, but they didn't have that when I was there. But I
Gotcha.
learned a lot about how. I guess the most important takeaway for startups is that it's great to you can do a lot of cool things. You have a good cash cow business. They kind of have they sit on the way people get into the web, and they charge people to get to a lot of places they want to go. It's a very effective strategy. They've done very well with it, and so if you can find a highly defensible, highly scalable business like that, there's no better business really. But then, even if you do that on a much smaller scale, you can start funding other
Uh
cool
huh.
projects, right? So and they've done some amazing things funding other cool projects with that main cash cow.
Gotcha. Okay. So now, what's interesting is like a lot of entrepreneurs, especially, you're in the software space, right? A lot of entrepreneurs kind of have this mindset of, I'm going to build a non-profitable business, right? And get in a lot of debt. But now, how is it? Let's say, I'm watching this right now, and I have a company, doing maybe, 5 to 10 million in EBITDA, or maybe I have a couple million. How am I able to, and most of that's not profit. How am I able to kind of turn a profit, especially on the software side?
Well, yeah, I mean, software is tricky because you tend to run them either at a loss or at break even, depending on how much money you have to sink into the things. for a lot of their life, right? For because growth is really what the markets reward. Um,
Okay.
and so, and often it's, a first mover advantage and people really owning and dominating a space. And you, you get out ahead. Once you're out ahead in a space, and we're a decent case study on this, right? Like we were bootstrapped, but we started years before other people in the space, right? And so I think
Okay.
we have competitors that started 4 years after us, but it's really hard to be number two in a space because we all when they started, we already had a decent product, and so we already had a decent sized team. So it's like everything you build as the number two player in software, the other guys are already making a bunch of money and already have a bunch of customers, more experience with the customers, understand what they want better, and they're always 3 years down the line, and no one ever wants the product that's 3 years behind. So it's really hard to catch up unless the front runner stumbles somehow, or what happens more often. I think the way you see catch ups occur is when the front runner gets purchased by someone who just uses it like a tuck-in acquisition or an acquihire, or to do something smaller than the original vision was. Then that second place or third place company can kind of fill the original role.
Got you. Okay. So now this kind of brings me to this point. Obviously, you're familiar with the introduction of ChatGPT, right? By OpenAI,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Sure.
Okay. So Google came up with the Bard, which is supposed to be competitive to ChatGPT, and right now is struggling for market share because ChatGPT is going to dominate the space. Now, what would you say? What's your take as far as the AI revolution was? I'm curious what's your take as far as like, do you think ChatGPT is going to revolutionize the way we do business? Do you think the AI is going to bring about the Terminator 2.0? Or what's your thought process there?
I mean, I think the Terminator 2.0 is a pretty low probability. I mean, I don't have expertise in this. I know some of the people that do are pretty concerned. I wouldn't say that I'm more of an enterprise software guy. I can have less of an educated position on what the risk that it takes over the nukes and kills us all, what that probability is. But I guess in terms of will it, I guess I would have a better opinion on will it revolutionize business and change everything. And I don't think it will. I think a lot of things in 5 years from now or 10 years from now will be like, oh, it's kind of the same. Um, but I think certain areas will be revolutionized or eliminated, and we've seen this many times with technology throughout
Yeah.
history, right? I mean, the advancements in farming technology made it so instead of 95% of the people in the economy working in agriculture in America, it became 5%. And you know, so we've lived through a lot of revolutions in the past, and I think that it will change certain roles and certain things that it'll automate a lot of annoying tasks, and hopefully, but I don't think it'll be the elimination of jobs. I think that certain jobs will go away, or because it can do them better. Um, but we've been seeing that with software for a long time, regardless. And there are just certain tasks that computers are better at, and this is a new tool for the computers to get even better at stuff. But do I think that you know we're going to have to start paying people to do nothing because there's not going to be any jobs in a few years? I don't think so. I think that we'll shift things around, and but so I think that in 10 years we won't be like, wow, that's the day the world all changed, when they released that and it could write articles automatically instantly. Like, I think it changes some things, but I don't think it doesn't change everything.
Actually, so now let's say I'm in the camp and I'm in a party where I'm like, I'm a copywriter. Let's say I'm a copywriter, right? And now ChatGPT can write almost human like better copy, right?
Hmm.
Now, what advice would you give to people whose skill sets per se are very large? It's easy for for a business owner to just, go on ChatGPT and say, write me a basic ad for so and so product, or write me a speech for so and so. What would you say to those people who are like, man, my skill sets would be replaced by artificial intelligence?
Yeah, well, and I think there are roles that are going to be like that. Just like when when the automated reaper came out, people whose job was to reap wheat, they had to start doing something else, right? So I think if your job is in those crosshairs, I would consider doing something else. I don't think it'll eliminate that job, but one person will be enabled to do a lot more than they would have been able to otherwise, right? So one one person who was writing marketing copy can now write a lot more marketing copy if they're enabled by these tools. And so I think it does just like accounting software made, it didn't take away accounting jobs, but it did a lot of the, it probably made each accounting job, each person doing accounting jobs able to do more stuff. So yeah, I don't think marketing roles. I don't think marketing jobs go away, but I think that maybe the things that they were spending their time on shift, and I think it's important. It's a highly dynamic and fast moving world right now, and I think that everyone needs to be able to learn new things, develop new skills, fulfill new roles in the economy to succeed. Because
Okay.
I think that the percentage of employment will stay similar, but the jobs will shift around.
Got you. Okay. Now, if I'm understanding clearly, it's more or less not to be worried about the fact that, hey, you know what, my job can be, replaced, but more like how can I leverage AI to, rather than putting out one copy, I can put out 10, 15 copies. Now, I mean, there's having this issue as well, as far as, qualified talent. How do you find qualified talent to help work with you on uh, the software side of things?
Well, I think I think that a year and a half ago, this is a very different conversation than today. I think it was much harder a year and a half ago to hire. I mean, certainly, and it depends where you are in the world, right? I mean, in
Yeah.
America, in America, in the software industry, we probably have negative 25% unemployment, right? Like if there were more people who were qualified to do these types of jobs, more if there were more Python engineers, they would be hired by someone. If there were more growth marketers, they would be hired by someone. If there were more salespeople, they would be hired. So it, it was harder. Now it is still hard to find people who are talented, but I think it's important to invest in HR and recruiting and develop processes that are scalable and are able to uncover talent. And it's important to have a reputation for treating people well and paying people well, and that's how you become a top employer by behaving that way. There's a lot more transparency than there used to be, right? Like 15, 20 years ago, when if I joined a company, I didn't really know a ton about that company. Today, Glassdoor kind of tells you what's going on at that company. There's
Yeah.
there's a lot of resources. So if your reputation as an employer, I think, is an important one. Everyone's got backdoor ways to, people they can everyone's connected on LinkedIn to someone who used to work for you, or their friends connected to someone who used to work for you. So that knowledge is out there, right? How you treat
Okay.
people as an employer. So I think if you have a good reputation and you invest in HR and you invest in the processes, and even when the economy was tight, we didn't have a difficult time finding top talent.
Gotcha. Okay. Now, this kind of segues into starting Badger Maps. Like, what was that? What was that inspiration? Because it's a sales. It's pretty much a software designed for sales reps, right?
Yeah.
It's what was that inspiration? Like, where how did you get up to that? Like, hey, I want to start this.
Well, when I tell this story, I sound a lot less smart and creative than I wish I was. But I was in field sales, so I built a piece of software that's map based for field salespeople. Right, field salespeople go out in the field. They need to build a route. They need to decide which customers they're going to focus on seeing in a day, given that you can only be in one place at one time. Right, so imagine if you're
Mm.
covering, you know the country of France, and you're the French field sales rep for a company. and you sell medical devices, you've got to get, there's 3,000 doctors that you could talk to, and you have to decide which ones you're going to talk to based on a whole bunch of factors. And you have some information, but not all the information about them. And so maybe you're going to see 10 of them a day or swing by 10 of their offices a day. And you need to pick which 10 that's going to be. And then you need to actually decide in what order you're going to do those 10. And then you need to decide how to fit that into a schedule. Because maybe, the 10 o'clock and the 2 o'clock are both set meetings. So it's a complicated problem. I set out to solve it because I understood it, because I had been a field sales rep, right? So my role at IBM, and at Google as well, was I was a field sales rep selling software, and so I understood the problems that field salespeople had. And the last thing that I was selling at Google, I mean, I guess I was selling it the whole time at Google, but I ended up focusing on just the Google Maps API when my last probably year and a half at Google. So I was selling the tool and I understood the tool that was a key piece of solving this. And I had been working a lot with mobile. I mean, this was 11 years ago, so the iPhone was pretty new, right? The
Yeah.
whole ecosystem, and we understood that these phones were going to get a lot better, a lot faster. They were very limited at the time by the mobile internet.
Okay.
It was just slow to bring up directions, but we knew that was going to get a lot better. The phone companies were investing a lot in that at the time. And so it was kind of obvious where the puck was going, right? Like, here was a big problem, and there's a lot of field salespeople in a lot of industries. I mean, and so this is a meaningful problem. It's not just this isn't really vertical. It's med device, it's pharmaceutical, but walk up and down Main Street anywhere in the world, there's a bar over there. Someone's selling that bar beer. There's a dentist office over there. Someone's selling that dentist office, the teeth that they're inserting, after people's rot out of their heads. Every single thing that you're walking down the street seeing, that's an end node of consumption, but someone somewhere made the stuff, and then someone sold the stuff to the place that the stuff gets consumed. And so it's a pretty broad industry. So I understood kind of the size of the problem, and I understood the way to solve it with mobile technology and mapping technology. And so it was. I definitely don't get a creative genius award for coming up with this company or starting it, because I was very exposed to both the solution side and the problem side of the space.
Gotcha. So walk me through just a little bit about the operations of how Badger maps from a sales rep perspective. So I'm a sales rep, I'm looking for a way to organize my leads. I go on the iOS, I go on the iOS, I go on a Play Store, and I look and I say, okay, Badger maps. I sign for Badger maps. How does Badger maps help increase my efficiency per se? How does it help me go from being able to just see 5 to 7 clients or 5 to 7, door-to-door sales to, I'm going 14, 15? Like, what is that system? How does it systemize the process?
All right, guys. I hate to interrupt the podcast, but before we go ahead and get back into the interview here, a little word from our sponsors. So today's video is sponsored by RIZN Results. RIZN Results is a virtual assistant service that provides premium virtual assistant service to small business owners, independent sales reps. Now, if you are an independent agent, an independent sales rep, or you are a business owner, and in some way, shape, or form, you're struggling having to cold call leads, you're struggling having to actually send emails, and you actually need help in your business, RIZN Results offers you a low cost, efficient way in which you can be able to delegate that service to your administrative assistant, your virtual assistant, cold caller, or you can also get a social media manager. Now, RIZN Results also comes with a free trial of a virtual assistant. What does that mean? That means you actually get to try out to see if that virtual assistant is for you. Now, guess what? There's just one catch. You have to pay for a one-time setup fee. That one-time setup fee helps onboard your virtual assistant into your system or whatever software that you are using. Now, if RIZN Results sounds like something that's going to be a fit for your business, go ahead and click the link in the description, and that's going to take you to the RIZN Results website where you can go ahead and claim your free trial, or you can go right now to RIZNResults.com and go ahead and claim your free trial. And back to.
So Um, a sales rep has their information somewhere already. They know a lot about their customers. They probably don't know everything, and we have connections to bring in more information to them within Badger. That's very helpful. But they know a lot already, and they might have that all that information in a CRM system. They might have all that information in a spreadsheet. They might have all that information written down in notebooks, but um, but hopefully it's in a CRM system or some sort of well organized spreadsheet or Google Doc. And then what we do is we bring that information into our product, and so we either connect to their CRM system if it's a company, right? They maybe they have Salesforce or Microsoft Dynamics or Zoho or HubSpot for their CRM. We'll connect into that system with a real time connector, and so now you're viewing all the information that was in your Salesforce CRM on your phone in a mapping environment. And so you can now see all your customers. You can colorize them by customer type, by whatever data you had in the CRM. We can bring any of it in, and now you can colorize it and start working with it. And then you can design your day, right? You can figure out, okay, well, I know that I'm driving over to this suburb over here to sell to dentist offices, and I've got a meeting with this dentist. Who's on the way out there that's important? Who's on the way back? What does that schedule look like? Will I be able to make it here by 4 p.m.? What if I move this around like this? And it just makes all that very easy. And so sales reps currently have to solve that problem. They just have to solve it in their head. So, it's what we do is kind of like, what spreadsheets do for accountants, Badger Maps does for salespeople who are in the field. It automates a bunch of things. It gives them tools to make decisions. It gives them the ability to organize information, all in an app on their phone. And they can use it on their computer too if they're sitting at a desk. But a lot of times these guys are running around in the field, and it gives them all the information in their CRM. It gives it to them in a format that they can use when they're in the field, which is really important because a lot of times field sales teams struggle to use their CRM as much as they would like to, because the CRM systems aren't really built to be mobile historically. They're more built to use on a computer because they're complicated pieces of software and there's a lot going on in them. It's not a mistake or anything. It's just how it is. But when someone is in the field, there are certain things that they need at their fingertips, and it needs to be structured in a certain way. The same way if you were a consumer looking for Thai food restaurants, Yelp is really useful the way they've kind of designed their app, right? It would be less useful if I just gave you a spreadsheet of all Thai food places in New York. If you want, if I give you a spreadsheet of all restaurants in New York and you wanted Thai food in this neighborhood that was open now, that was, and so Yelp is kind of giving you that information, but in a way on your mobile device that you can really use it. We're doing the same thing for field salespeople.
Got you. Okay. So now, into the CRM part perspective, as far as Badger Maps. Now, Badger Maps, it comes with a free trial, I assume.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yes. So it comes with a free trial. So it's available in the iOS. It's available on the Play Store. So if you're watching this, if you're a sales rep and you are, pretty much doing your door-to-door sales, or you're going out there to see clients, just go ahead and go to the iOS store and claim a free trial of Badger Maps. Now, I'm just also curious as well. Let's say because I have a lot of friends who are travel nurses, right? They have to see multiple patients, right? Will this also apply to census to, say I was a travel nurse and I wanted to organize the patients I was going to go see, and I also use Badger Maps?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're HIPAA compliant, which is, the American health information protection type thing. So we have a bunch of people in the healthcare space, travel nurses, home care, hospice, things along those lines. That's a common use case for this. I mean, there's a bunch of field service roles. I mean, it's really for field working people. I guess most of our marketing information is for field salespeople, just because there's so many field salespeople. But really, there's lots of field services that, such as traveling nurses, that this is really helpful for.
Okay. So, all right. So this pretty much applies if I have to do anything. It has me go out into the field. So, all right. So now, we've covered the sales aspect of things. Now let's talk about the startup side of things, because we have different kinds of people that watch a sales rep, and then we also have those people who run in the individual software companies.
Right.
Now, let's say I am starting a software service, as a service or a software company per se, and you've mentioned bootstrapping, right? So, how much of your money did you put in, and how much of your money did you actually use debt?
So, I was in a fortunate position starting the company because I had just worked at Google, and I had some success there. So I had some money that I could invest in the company. So that kept us from needing to raise money right away. And so we were able to bootstrap it from the beginning. Uh, and we ended up never raising professional money on the outside. We did do a friends and family round for about 400 grand in 2011, late 2011, I believe it was. Or no, late 2012, I think it was. Um, and and we and that was just friends and family, a convertible note. But we were really able to monetize the product pretty quickly, and it was a very basic version of it, but it still solved a big enough problem that people were willing to pay for it. We did a deal for just over $300,000 about 2 years into the business with a big dental company, and they, even though we were just kind of, we didn't have a we didn't work on iOS yet. We just had a browser based version and a very basic version of the routing and optimizing stuff. But really, it was just being able to see their territory and all their data about their customers on a map and work and manipulate that information by colorizing the pins in the map, filtering the pins in the map. That basic version of the software was still worth them purchasing it. And they were a decent sized company. So that, we ended up getting like 300K for that. And that, not completely, but mostly paid for the year. Cause there were only 4 people at the company at that point. So I guess that was key to our bootstrapping, was we were able to win deals early on. And another reason we were able to do that was I had, my background in sales really was helpful in that it's not helpful that I don't know how to code, because it would have been useful to have another set of hands in the keyboard. But what was useful is that whole time that I wasn't able to code while we were getting the product going, I was doing a lot of outreach and interacting with people, getting close to prospective customers, showing them what we were planning on doing, getting in front of the people that I thought would be the buyer, and getting feedback from them that turned out to be really valuable. But also asking them the key question, like, hey, if we were to build this for you, would you buy it for this much money? Would you spend? And I think it was $35 per sales rep at the time. It's actually only, we didn't. So now that it's got all this stuff in it, we haven't raised the prices that much. It's $50 a month now, but it was 35 at the time. And so I was, and so that was the question. Like, hey, it's really important to ask, will you pay this much money for it? Because people aren't going to tell you your baby's ugly, right? But if you ask them,
Yeah.
hey, would you you said, so you ask them, hey, does this solve I think this is for you. Check out what I'm doing. Okay. Like, does this solve an important problem for you? Everyone will say yes at that point. But then if you ask them the next question, would you pay this much money a month for it, for your team, to solve this problem? They'll say no if it's not the right thing, and they'll say yeah, of course, if it is the right thing, right? And so it's important to ask that last question. A lot of people skip that step when they're doing product development and early customer discovery. But and then you can kind of, they know they're getting a basic version of it, but you can say, well, hey, we're building this right now. Let me finish building it, and I'll come back to you then. And then you can circle back in 6 months when the thing's actually more built out, and you can say, hey, we've got this thing. You mentioned last time we talked, you said that you'd be interested in it, in purchasing it. If we had built it, it's built. Would it be a good time to take a look at it? And there's going to be some hair on it at that point, right? It's not going to be perfect. It takes 5 years to build a good product. So, and unfortunately, you don't have 5 years. So you got to start bringing in money before that. So even though there's hair on it, but you can show them and say, hey, it's not perfect yet. We only have this much. We're gonna have this, and this coming in next. But it's only $35 a month right now. It's going to be 10 times that in a couple of years. In a year from now. But you can lock in this price now if you come on board, and that's by doing that we were able to bring in enough people that we were able to cover the cost of the company and bootstrap it.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay. That's interesting. You mentioned a few things there, which I kind of want to piggyback to. Was you mentioned how you didn't have much coding experience at the time, right? So
None.
you
I'm
focused
just not.
more.
I'm not a coder by nature. I'm all business side. I'm still useless.
Got now, not necessarily because uh, I know a lot of software, from, I redesign our own products, and I'm fortunate enough to have some background knowledge, so I have help out on that side of things. But it's software coding and programming. It's not sexy. It's not attractive, right? It's not, and it also, frankly, I find that you become more introverted the more you actually code,
Hmm.
right? You become more about the computer, right? And because it becomes an obsession per se. And there's a saying that there's two camps of people. There's the Edison camp, and then there's the Tesla camp, right? And everyone said Tesla built everything, and then Edison was the part, right? Because when you remember now, we all remember Edison, right? This guy did this guy came up with this. So I think from your perspective, how much would you say the sales and marketing plays what role would you say sales and marketing plays in the success of a company, especially a startup?
Oh, easily half. I mean, you need both. You can't sell a garbage product these days. Word will get out that it's garbage, but
Yeah.
you also can't. If you can create something that turns water into wine, and you're still not going to be able to sell it unless you market and sell it well, right? Like
Yeah.
on the consumer side. Sometimes things are more viral, but there's nothing on my side of the world, enterprise software. There's nothing that's that sexy. It's like, hey, we're solving this problem by digitizing your assets. Nothing's interesting. Like, so it's not going to be viral.
Yeah.
No one's going to hear about it. It needs to be sold. It needs to be, you have to have the business side. And so, I think ideally for a company of this nature, very few people are great at sales and business and technology and coding, right? Like that'd be a unicorn of a guy, right? Or girl. It's so rare to have, because some of those skills are kind of not in conflict with one another, but it's like if you spent the time to develop one, you weren't developing the other. Like you either studied business or you studied coding, whether in school or the school of hard knocks. Either way, you it's hard to have studied up really well on both. And so I think there's a reason why a lot of great companies have been founded by two co-founders, one who's more technical, one who's more business oriented. I don't think it would have certainly, had I gotten my undergrad in CS, it would have been useful many, many times in starting this company. But there was no time when I was 30 to go back and learn this stuff. It's just, and I have met people who are like that, who are like, oh, I'm going to start a startup as soon as I get really good at coding, which I'm trying to learn in my free time, around my real job. And it's hard to get that. It's hard to make that work, I think.
Got you. Okay. So you mentioned another interesting point. So I'm assuming that there's a technical aspect, that you have another founder as well, who is also the technical side of things in Badger, correct?
Yes. And I think that works
Right
out
now.
real well. If both people can trust that, if you can find someone who's great and both people can trust that the other person's doing their part, I think it can work real well.
Gotcha. So more of like a yin yang kind of deal, because yeah, and you mentioned something which is very interesting, is there's a lot of people who want to start companies, but they're waiting to get the skill set. Just like a little backtrack, we were launching 3 new products. We're supposed to launch 3 new product this quarter. And I sat with my team, and they were like, well, we don't have a lot of the customers' feedback as far as like, do they really want this product? Right. So if
Yeah.
we launch this and we send it's like the Amazon's Fire Phone, right? They launched a product, say, hey, people are going to like this. And guess what? It was a flop. Right? And I think to most people who are like on the fence of, hey, when I want to start a company and then you get the skill set first, I think what aspect would you say it's better to get the audience? Because you have a podcast, Outside Sales Stock Podcast, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what aspect would you say it's important to actually get the audience first? Because think about it from a perspective of, let's say podcasting was around, 10, 11 years ago, and you had an audience of 1 million to 2 million people who were, followers of your work. Would it have helped you actually to sell bad your apps and actually get into a position where you are
Yeah, of
profit was way
course,
more?
but that I wouldn't wait to pursue an idea until you have a massive audience in the space of it, because you often don't even know exactly who the audience is going to be for something until you've started building it and until you can. I wouldn't go after a passive audience of that nature. When you're building something, I think you want to proactively approach the people and this is why it's so important to have sales skills to start one of these things. Is
Yeah.
salespeople know how to do this and other people don't. You have to proactively approach the people that you think are the buyer of the product that you're building before it's built, and you have to talk to as many of them as you can. I mean, I probably talked to hundreds. I mean, maybe 3, 4, 500. I don't even. I couldn't even. I don't even know. And that, like, I must have reached out to 10,000 to get that number of people engaged. Right. Reaching out, being like, "Hey, I'm solving a problem in your space. I think it's maybe interesting. Haven't solved it. Haven't started. Haven't started it yet. Haven't done it yet. But wanted to, given your position at Pepsi Cola in the operations department, I think your perspective would be so valuable for me if we just chat for 15 minutes." And you can tell them what you're doing, and ask that magic question I talked about earlier, like, would you buy this if I were to build this? Would you buy it for this much money? And sit back and listen. And I mean, you don't want to try to build that network of. It's silly to try to create an operations podcast for 10,000 people or for a million people. You said that are listening to it. It's so hard to do it that way. And what if the thing you were building actually turned out not to be for operations people, but turned out to be for salespeople? And you had to pivot a little bit. Now your whole audience is a waste. I think you approach proactively and then build your audience later after you already have product market fit. That's when it's time. Like, I didn't start the podcast for field salespeople from day one. I probably started that like 5 years after I started the business, and now it's like a pretty a lot of people listen to it now. But that's because I think it's the only podcast for field salespeople, and I bring on experts in sales and have them teach the things they teach, but through the lens of field sales. So it's really useful for field salespeople. Very little of it is based on what I know. It's other people, but it would have been, and I did end up pursuing the thing that I started out pursuing, which I think is, happens less often than not, right? That's rare. Usually you do have to pivot, but I think you scale your marketing and your audience building and all that stuff after you've already got product market fit and you're running along. At first, if you think you got to find thousands of the people that you think are going to buy this and reach out to them on LinkedIn and network to get in front of them and go to the conferences that they're at and talk with them and get that important feedback.
Got you. Okay. So you also mentioned, which is very, very important here, ask qualifying questions, right? Which are, would you, if I were to build this, would you actually, is this something that would solve a problem? And then, would this cost, $1,000 or $2,000? Would you pay for this? So since you have, enterprise sales, what are the key pointers that what key tips you give to sales reps that are also in enterprise sales is to, hey, this is how much I've been able to use to, close, 10, 20, 30, $40,000. Because enterprise sales is not small. You're not talking about small contract.
Yeah, no, and I've done contracts for. I mean, well, we have a lot of contracts for $500 a month, and I've done software deals for 1.5 million a year, right? So and software can get a lot more expensive than that. It's just it's all over the board, depending on and you want to price in such a way that allows you to scale naturally, right? You want to You want to charge a big company a lot more. You want a fair reason to charge a big company a lot more than you're charging a little company, but you also want to charge a division of a big company maybe the same amount as you're uh, charging a small company. And so you want something. It's great to base your pricing on usage or licenses or something that scales with your customers' usage.
Got you. Okay. So how do you structure that pricing, right? So most founders, I think they have what would I call it? This mentality of they want to charge the least amount of money so they can get the most people in. But then what ends up happening is they end up getting so many people in for a lower price that the margins are so tight that they barely able to survive, right?
Yeah,
So
and the pricing
how
is definitely an art and a science. I mean, you can't make it so cheap that everyone's happy with the price. Someone who's kind of your average customer should be like, yeah, that's expensive, but worth it. I think is if you were going to qualitatively shoot for an amount. Generally, there's kind of comps in the space that allow you to figure out. Well, this isn't that, but this is kind of similar. Like for us. I mean, we a lot of people use us with their CRM system, right? So it's like an add-on to a CRM system. There are a lot of add-ons to CRM systems that are about $50 a month. Some of them are 90, some of them are 20, but like, depending on the complexity and this and that, the importance of the problem solved. But there's a lot of things like that. So, and this is about, and people no, very few people are ever like, that is insane what you guys are charging, right? That's so expensive. That almost never happens. And sometimes when you're selling to, certain places in the world, $50 a month is a lot, but no company in America is like, that's crazy to pay $50 a month to make my salespeople 20% more expensive. Like no one says that, but also like no, no one like laughs at us and they're like, why is that so cheap? I think you want a price that makes sense to most people. Sure, it's going to feel very inexpensive to some people, like especially like if we're selling to like a med device company who sells an expensive medical device and they're paying the sales rep 300 grand a year and they're like, this just made our whole sales team 20% more effective, and you're charging us 20 grand a year. That's so stupid. We pay each one of these reps 300 grand a year. This is so cheap. But at the same time, there's like people selling low margin beverages to convenience stores or something, and so it's much it's more appropriate. You can't price perfectly for everyone, and it creates too much friction to try to negotiate every deal, and to scrape every nickel off the table. So I think it's better to have a transparent price that scales with their usage, and 10% of people are going to think it's way too cheap, and 10% of people are going to think it's way too expensive. But most people are like, yeah, it sounds about right. Um, so
gotcha. Now this is just out of curiosity. And are you familiar with white label, like software?
yeah, for sure.
So now the white label business model is, business model that a lot of people are using is rather they sell directly to consumer, you sell directly to the business and give them the right to resell the product.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something that, might be in the future for badge brands?
No, you don't really see that in enterprise SaaS, but at least I can't think of any good examples of that anyway. Uh, Maybe back in the day with like certain types of security software, there because it's like a component of other pieces of software. I guess that's where you see it, is when something's like a component of something. Like Google Maps is a part of Badger. Like we buy our maps from them, but it's not really white labeling. It's just kind of we're using their API. I mean, to totally like wrap. I can't think of any examples where people totally wrap a product up with a different piece of marketing. What's much more common, I think, is partnering with people. So like the reseller or the VAR, the value added reseller, will sell your product with your branding, but they'll find, if they'll source the customer and take a percentage to do that. That's much more common. Or just the kind of the attribution model, where if someone directs you traffic, they get rewarded based on how much that traffic closes. That you do see that. Um, and you see a lot of companies, like if there's a Salesforce integrator, right? So meaning someone that like deploys, like when you buy Salesforce, if you have a decent sized team, you don't deploy it yourself. It's too complicated. You hire someone to help you. And so that company is in a really good place to recommend software that you need. And so if they some integrators will like want a percentage for making the recommendation, but a lot don't even want it. They're like, well, we know this is the best thing to recommend, and so we recommend it to our customers. That's literally what they pay us for. So you see partnerships like that, which are either $0 in exchange for things, or some of those companies like to take 20% of the first year. Uh,
Got you.
but yeah, I wouldn't say white labeling. I mean, if IBM walked up to me and said, "Hey, we want to sell this stuff. We realize how important it is, and but we want to sell it as IBM's sales field sales routing tool, the IBM field sales router." Like, I'd be fine with that. I mean, I've never seen that model happen. Um, they Because if IBM thought this was that strategic, they would just purchase it, right? So, or if Microsoft, Salesforce bought my biggest competitor, although they kind of turned him into something different, so which was really useful for me. But um, like, if a big company really wants something, they'll just buy it.
Got you. Okay. So then, because the white labeling space is something that's interesting, especially in the marketing side of things. If you're familiar with go high level, I'm not sure if you're familiar with them, but familiar with them being more of a marketing arm of, basically gives, users the ability to resell the rights to the software as the own with the own brand.
Yeah, no, and that, no, I get it. Yeah, I understand what the white labeling space. I haven't seen it for this type of software before, like, SaaS software. I haven't seen people just wrap it and resell it under different names, but because they usually the reseller would want all the benefit of, if it was a meaningfully sized company, they'd want all the benefits that already confers, right? The branding and the all the resources that are out there floating around, all the G2 recommendations and everything else, right? Like it'd be much harder to just, if some reselling companies like that, they tend to keep the same brand in place. They don't change the name. If you renamed this Fox Maps and tried to sell it, it'd be really hard because there's no one knows anything about Fox Maps. Whereas a lot of people have heard of Badger Maps. A lot of people have in the space have heard of Badger. I mean, obviously, if you were a dentist, you wouldn't have heard of it. But like field salespeople, a lot of them have heard of this, and there's a ton of information on the web about it, and hundreds of reviews on every review site. Like, it'd be really hard to just like put a new name and a new wrapper and say, "Hey, this is Fox Maps, and it does this for field salespeople." Like that. I think there's a reason that people don't do this.
Yeah, no, that was no. What you say is very, very interesting because you already decades, almost a decade or more, the Badger Maps existing, and you built that brand already exists. So for a company like yours, it makes absolute zero sense to white label because it's like you already have established credibility. But there are a lot of people who are coming in like into like the software space, right? And becoming into the software space, like go high level. And I think why they did it was they were competitor to ClickFunnels at the time. And they were like, okay, rather than competing and going to marketers, let's just resell the software. Let's resell the ability to clone to basically create a new market. I think that was kind of what was going on. But I was just kind of curious in that perspective per se. Now, in the
I
perspective,
guess it would make
right?
sense there if they're like, let's use the example on nurses that you brought up earlier, right? For me, like, we don't really like, if a company that sold a lot to nurses wanted to go after that industry, and and we don't all of our branding and marketing is based around field service people or field sales people. We nurses will be talked about in a little bit on our website, but not much, right? And certainly not on the front page, right? So it, if you were taking the product to a different market, that would probably, expanding the TAM, if you will, that would make sense to give it a different label. But even there, only if it's going to like cause confusion. Like, it does kind of make sense. I would think it would make sense to nurses that like, hey, yeah, I see why this software that mostly is talking about field salespeople is also good for me, and they've got a landing page about nurses. That makes sense. And we have to, and partnerships are different, right? It's the full white label. I think there's some challenging to it, but like partnerships, like with a reseller or a VAR, that we do a bunch of that, and often it's like a consulting firm, but sometimes it's just a person who has a lot of expertise in a space and a lot of exposure to a space. They, they'll want to basically approach the space for us. And it's not that they're acting like a salesperson, but it's kind of like a salesperson. It's similar in a lot of ways, but they're opening up a new space for us.
Got you. Okay. Yeah, I mean, the partnership per se is, I think it's lucrative because you leverage in the existing name and the existing brand versus the white label perspective. I think the more or less the white labeling perspective appeals, which is interesting. It appeals a lot to people's egos, right? Because I think we live in a, from me perspective, personally, what I've seen is we live in a very current economy is a self-centric economy, and a lot of people rather say, CEOs of a company than actually, operate in a company, right? So I think it just kind of feeds into that ego per se.
Oh,
That's my
interesting.
personal,
Yeah,
take on it.
yeah, and maybe that's you definitely see like a consulting firm. They've got their own name and then a bunch of things in their bag. You see this in like the med device space too. Like there's like someone will be selling. There'll be a representative for eight different pieces of eight different medical devices, and so there's eight medical devices in their bag. They'll go to a doctor and um, maybe there's eight medical devices that like a dentist would use. And so they're able to sell all of them. They don't work for any one of those companies. They're kind of like an independent rep with an independent company. But they're not changing the name of the actual product. They're just saying, my company distributes, the best of breed medical devices. Here are the eight medical devices that we're working with right now. And they take a cut of 20% to sell that medical device. So I guess that's
Yeah.
very similar
So
to the
that
partner model here in software that you see. You see that a lot. You see that a lot, that type of partner model. They're just not changing
yeah,
the name of the product because there's so much overhead with that to like, and there's no, you couldn't sell that medical device to the dentist because they'd be like, well, what's the Johnson device for I've never heard of this. And
yeah,
you're like, oh, it's the same thing as Merck's device for this, or some big, a large medical device company's stuff for this, right? Like they the brand recognition I think is important, and that already that's really
absolutely.
hard to replicate.
Absolutely, yeah, because it takes it's decades to build a brand, even though it's saying it takes decades to build a brand, but it takes seconds to root, right?
So true.
So obviously recent events that happened. But so just walk me through the as we wrap up here the operations as far as like if I were to start a software company, right, and I want to build it from ground up, let's say I have 200 to 250,000 saved up. How do I put the right team in place?
Well, I think you want to make sure you've built the right business processes out. You want to automate everything you can, use software for everything that you can. Um, but if you are bootstrapping a business, it's hard because people have to wear a lot of hats, right? So you really have to be very careful about the
Yeah,
team that you're putting in place. Um, uh, but yeah, I think a lot of a business is the processes that are internal, like the way they do things, and a lot of those can be very scaled and they can be passed cleanly from person to person. As a growing company, there's a lot of passing things around. So having great,
yeah,
as you move from 4 people to 8 people, that's twice as many people. Everyone's got half as many hats on, so you need to be able to cleanly pass processes from one person to another. So great documentation is great for that. I use Google Docs for that a lot. Like, here's how this is done, have it written down, and then it makes it much easier to pass it to someone else. But yeah, I mean, I think a small organization is a great place for interns too. I think people who don't have a lot of experience really get a lot from working at a small company because they're working with the people that do stuff. and they're working on meaningful things. Whereas if you get an internship at Microsoft or something, they've got enough people. They've got 100,000 people working there already. So every important job is already being done by someone. Whereas at a 4-person startup software company, you know, if you're an intern there, there's really important things that you're going to be in charge of, and so you get a lot more exposure. So I think that's a useful thing for all parties involved. It's kind of hard to get a program like that going, but we invested in a pretty robust internship program when we were a small company, and that really, I think that was meaningful, and a lot of students learned a ton, and everybody benefited from that. So
Gotcha.
that can be there's a natural fit there. But yeah, I guess those are kind of the highlights I would say is, how to getting the train out of the station is really hard. Like once these trains are moving, they're hard to stop, but getting things going is challenging. And so, there's just, you got to wear a lot of hats and a lot of late nights and a lot of learning how to do new things and getting it done and jumping in and getting your hands dirty.
Gotcha. Okay, so this leads me to my last question on the space here is entrepreneurship is, being a business owner is filled with more downs than ups, right? But the ups make up for the downs. What has been a turning point moment in the history of Badger Maps, with the founding of the company where you were at the verge, which, it was a make or break moment, which means if things didn't go right, company would be done. Has that ever happened?
One good example of that was that big deal we got done early on. I mean, I don't know if the company would have been done for if we didn't get it, but we probably would have had to raise money, which maybe we would have been successful at. Maybe we wouldn't have at that point. But we I think at any point until you're able to pay for all the people that you need with revenue, you're always kind of in a make or break moment. And there are probably more downs than ups. I mean, there's also a lot of like hard work and drudgery, right? Like there's a lot of slogging up the hill and army crawling through glass up a hill, right? Like there's a lot of pain and it's hard. There's a lot of growing pains and challenges and that you just don't have in a smooth, larger business where things already work, right? So the first 5 years of a company until it's got a meaningful enough employees, until you have enough employees to kind of do the basic things that you need to do, and the money coming in the door to pay for them, things just stay very challenging, I think.
This is more of a personal question for me. This is just trying to get a feedback. This is off the audience. If you guys like it, absolutely use that information. Tips. I've had phases in my business where I've kind of had that moment of I doubted my capabilities as a leader in a business. And I've also had places where, you know, there's challenges that's happened. It's in a sense, we've had, non-comps of the product come out. We've had, you know, internal divisions within the staff. How are you mentally able to, one, overcome self-doubt, and two, stay objective, focused, knowing that, everything around you is telling you the truth? It's kind of like, oh, it's on fire.
Well, and sometimes it is on fire, and things aren't going to work out. I mean, a lot of times things don't in startups, and I think we can't take that too personally either. But I mean, in terms of staying positive and overcoming those challenges that you run into inevitably, tough competitors, crappy employees, whatever the challenge you're overcoming that week, right? Um, this person quitting, this person not doing their work, this person whatever the challenge may be, the government needing to deal with this or that regulation or whatever the challenge may be. I think it's important if things are working out, like rare, I guess your big question was about self-doubt, right? Like one, it's important to remember, like, you may not be perfect and you may not be great at everything, but C's get degrees around here, right? You have to 80/20 a lot of stuff and get it done and get it out the door. And you may not be great at everything, and maybe there are better people to be doing the thing that could be running it, but very rarely can you find that person to do it, and rarely, if you can, hire them as your COO. But rarely can you find that person to do it, and rarely is there anyone as good as you to run this business that you've been running for all this time. And so, if there is, you can hire them and equitize them, and you can become the chairman, right? Or but
Yeah.
there's a reason that VCs rarely swap out the founder, even when there's some problems with the founder, because until something's really at scale, and it's kind of, and the founder just hasn't scaled, then you see it a lot. But rarely is, if the plane is still getting built in the sky as it's flying barely, it's hard. Rarely is there anyone better than the current pilot, because they know where all the bodies are buried. They know where all the problems are. They know all the customers. They know all the employees. They've been, it's hard. You might not be the best, but you're the best this business has. So I guess that's one way to think about that and look at it.
Appreciate that, definitely. Okay, so as we wrap it up here, I have a series of dumb questions I like to ask you. I ask these questions because it kind of keeps it lighthearted, kind of gets us to talk about something else. So if you're ready here, these 3 questions. So Steve, can Badger Maps actually help sales reps find badgers in the wild?
No, unfortunately, it cannot. Although they did just find a wolverine, which is like a badger's cousin, the second wolverine ever they just found in California, which is exciting.
Oh, okay, awesome.
But
So that was not.
we didn't help find that at all. I just read about that in the news.
Oh man, it would have been funny if you did. Imagine publicity on that one.
Yeah, we're called Badger Maps because I went to the University of Wisconsin, so I'm a Badger. That's the mascot of Wisconsin.
Oh, you're a Badgers fan.
Yeah, I went there for college, and so that's our mascot. And so, and I like naming companies after nouns. I think it's very memorable. I don't like naming companies after adjectives or spelling things wrong. I think the best named business ever is TaskRabbit. It's easy to remember. A rabbit does tasks fast. You can kind of imagine, so that the animal fits the brand. It's very, it's just memorable, and it says what it does. So you're like, oh, what's that company I hired to do things like tasks? Oh, TaskRabbit. It's very, I like brands like that. I don't like brands like Microsoft, right? It's not really memorable or interesting. It's kind of weird. Doesn't roll off the tongue. Apple Computer. That's an amazing brand. I mean, Apple's, that works better for me, right? Where it's, and obviously both of those companies are very equally-ish successful, but I think Apple Computer is very, very memorable. Today, Microsoft, of course, is, but if you heard that word for the first time, it wouldn't have made any sense to you, right? It just they happened to be, well, they had a nice monopoly on something important for a long time. So, but
interesting.
But yeah, I think from a branding perspective, I love real things that kind of make sense with the thing that you do and describing the thing that you do. So I would have called Microsoft what would I have called them? Roadrunner operating system or something. People are like, what operating system? Oh, the fast one. But I don't know.
Well, they're not necessarily the fastest operating system anymore. I think.
No. But in 1994, whenever
1994. I mean, yeah, they would have. Yeah, no, that's interesting as far as naming it after nouns. TaskRabbit, your Badger Maps, kind of makes it, just like you said, it's easier. People remember things that are easier, right?
Yeah, it's just it sticks in their mind better. They can like someone who listened to this podcast, if they had a friend in field sales that they're getting a drink with in 2 weeks, I think they're going to remember Badger Maps, right? Badger is actually not the best example because no one knows what the hell a badger is, right? What is a badger? I thought that was a common mammal because I'm from the Midwest of the United States, but try explaining what a badger is to someone that lives in, Pakistan. They're like, what? So it's a vicious animal that eats bugs and stuff and small roadkill. Why'd you name it after that? Like, so,
Hey, you got to be a vicious sales rep.
I
Out there
guess it is
closing
kind of, yeah.
deals.
I mean, it is kind of on brand for sales to some degree, but like, it's just, I thought it was a better known animal than it is. Cause like where I'm from, everyone knows what a badger is, but like in a lot of parts of the world, they're like, no, I've never heard of this really not cute, vicious animal.
Yeah, no, few badges. So this is just a segue question here. So how did it come about with the operations moved to Spain?
Oh, that's a good question. So, you know, well, in a nutshell, engineers in America are real expensive, and anywhere except for here would be a great place to hire people. But I mean, we were probably looking at 15 different places or so, and I had some really good contacts in Spain. A guy that I worked with at Google, his brother lived in Spain and was good friends with a professor at this university, a professor of computer science, who was kind of dialed into the community there and was able to introduce us to a few people that would be great to kind of seed the team with. And so really that's why we ended up there. I wouldn't say there was anything that drove us to be there. And I also really like Southern Spain. I mean, I speak Spanish to some degree, and I really like the culture and the food. And it's one of my favorite places in the world. So I was a little biased towards it, but there's no reason that Guatemala or Pakistan or anywhere else wouldn't have also been an awesome place to put it. But yeah, anywhere but here. And I think one interesting tip I have on outsourcing engineering that might not come to mind is I think it's great to put your engineering team in places where there's not a direct flight from important places like San Francisco. So if you're going to put an engineering team in France, don't put it in Paris. Put it pretty much anywhere else that there's a university with a good engineering program, except for Paris, because when Facebook Paris opens up or Google Paris opens up, they're going to put, or I'm sorry, when Google France or Facebook France opens up, they're going to put it in Paris because they're only going to open up places that have a direct flight from the Bay Area or New York, right? Uh, but as a small company, if you get off the beaten path, that there's a lot less competition and a lot less awesome opportunities for people if in places that aren't a direct flight away from these places, these hubs of technology.
That's a very interesting thing to, that you brought up, and that's more or less thinking 5 to 10 years down the road. Is a giant corporation, like you said, like Google, they come into your town, your engineers, they're gonna offer them more money, and it's gone.
Yeah, and so you want to pick something that is kind of a little bit of a pain in the butt to get to. Like the town we're in is like a 4-hour bus ride from Madrid, or a 3-hour train ride, or it's a little flight. But like Google doesn't want to deal with that. They want to open up, and they're going to open it up in Madrid, where it's the coolest. Sure, it's more expensive, but they're rich. They don't care. so so they're going to go where the best talent, the most talent is. This is the biggest city, the coolest place. Like that's where they're going to go. So if you don't want to compete with those guys, go to the next city. So I
Gotcha.
guess in Spain, where our engineering team is, you'd want to avoid Barcelona and Madrid probably, but anywhere else is fine.
Gotcha. So that's interesting. It's to actually think about that. Okay. Note to self, if you're watching this, thinking of going overseas, and see, make sure there's no direct flights to San Francisco. Okay.
I will also say, yeah, exactly. If you can fly there easily, you don't want to open up an engineering team there. The other thing I would say is Eastern Europe has a lot of really good engineers who really get it. So I think Eastern Europe is a great place to put. Like a lot of people that I know have had a ton of success in Eastern Europe. It's not where we ended up, but and I've really enjoyed where we've been. But I would say that I think maybe just the commitment to mathematics that you see in Eastern Europe is kind of unparalleled. Well, I guess India has, China, huge commitments to mathematics as well, but Eastern Europe, I've seen a lot of people be really, really happy with that.
Oh, okay. It's that's important to pick up. So as we wrap up here, any questions you have for me? Anything you want to share with the audience?
No, I mean, if people are trying to get a hold of me, the best way to do it is probably on LinkedIn. Just search for Steve Benson, Badger Maps. You'll find me pretty fast. Um, if you know field salespeople, definitely let them know about Badger Maps. We're easy to find on the web, and people can do a free trial and check it out. See if it's a good fit for them.
Perfect. So the link to Steve's LinkedIn is going to be in the description, guys. So definitely check it out. And also, if you are currently an iOS user or you are an Android or you use Play Store, you want to go ahead and check out Badger Maps, because if you are build sales, that I used to door to door, I did door to door sales, and I can tell you one thing that helped me was I didn't use Badger Maps at the time, but I used software that allowed me to organize where my leads were. Because the last thing you need is to have Mary be one of your leads here. If you drive past Mary and you go to John while Mary was on the way, and then you have to go around all this way to come back, well, you could have just been actually organized. Remember, time management is key in sales. And Steve, it was an absolute pleasure having you on. Hopefully, I look forward to having you on the future podcast. And thank you.
Thank you, Emmanuel. It's been great being here.